Discover the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast, hosted by Tiffany Benitez and Jordan Franklin. Here, the complexities of being a woman in the tech industry are unraveled through discussions on key issues, personal growth, and how to succeed despite systematic challenges. It's a source of empowerment and inspiration for all women at all stages of their tech careers. Welcome to Women in Tech Trailblazers. I am so excited to be back with all of you with another episode today. We have the most incredible guests. So I know you're probably like, Tiffany says this at the beginning of every episode, but I'm super excited to bring who I have today forward. We are super intentional about going into the community and really approaching trailblazers. Like, that's part of the name of who we are, and it's really what we're after. So today is no exception. Super incredibly excited to have Astha here today, Astha Purohit. She is a global leader in retail with extensive expertise in artificial intelligence and our favorite, generative AI, hot topic for each and every one of us. She has advised Fortune 500 companies and senior C-suite leaders on driving innovation and growth in retail to deliver amazing customer experiences. She's a former McKinsey consultant, an MBA graduate from MIT Sloan, and a seasoned keynote speaker who has spoken at multiple conferences on AI and retail innovation. She's a director of product at Walmart, spearheading AI and ML model development and deployment across Walmart product ecosystem. And beyond her professional works, we like to really dig in, like, who are you as a person? Astha serves on the boards of AMITA, which is the Association of MIT Alumni, and Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. Astha is deeply committed to mentoring women leaders, fostering inclusive cultures, and guiding teams to thrive in dynamic environments. So welcome to the show. We are so super excited that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you. That was such a warm introduction. Thank you.
Yes, you have such an incredible background. And I just love, like, when we get to kind of share the bios. Number one, I think it's really important to acknowledge it's really hard. Like, a lot of times people are like bashful and like, oh, I want you to share all that or all, you know what I mean? But I think there's a point where we really need to like step in and own all the amazing things we've done. So I just kind of listed some of that out for you. As you know, like, the biggest theme for this podcast is really authenticity. It's how do we, especially as women, right? But we have allies that watch this too. They get some great nuggets as well. But like, how do we as women truly, number one, like, how do we define authenticity? Like, what does that mean to us? And then how do we wholly walk in that? So we always start our episode off with, tell me what authenticity means to you.
Yeah, that I think is such a good question because if you can authentically show up as yourself, every place you show up, then you know you did a good job, right? Because that's who you are. For me, I think when I think about that, it's when I'm quiet, right? Oftentimes there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of noise going on, and there's so much getting thrown at you. For me, I find that for me to authentically show up as myself, if I take some moments to ground myself, to quieten down before I face whatever it is in front of me, right? Like if the 10 minutes of meditation I do in the morning or I journal in the evening, it just allows me to calm down and process what's happening so I can show up as my best self, who I authentically want to be. I want to be warm. I want to be kind. I want to be playful with life. And generally, I found I am those things when I can be calm and grounded. So that is something I always try and do, like find that moment to center myself so I can show up as who I want to be instead of being stressed or like, I have 20 things on my plate. How do I get everything done? That is something that really helps ground me and lets me be authentically myself.
I absolutely love that. So I'm going to be transparent. We were having a pre-conversation before we hit record for podcast day, and she was asking me, how do you do the things that you do, right? And as I listen to you talk about what authenticity means to you, it is what are those tips and tricks that really keep us grounded, right? Like, how could you ever be authentic to who you are if you don't take time investing in knowing who you are, how you operate, what you need to keep your day going? So I really love that you kind of share, even in like what you think authenticity means to you. You shared like some of those tips and tricks on how to stay grounded, how to find what that is, and how to operate in that. So I absolutely love that. Again, I know we like had that semi conversation before we got on, so it was super cool to hear you share your tips and tricks, because that's something I look for. I like to partner and lock arms with other women that are doing incredible things, because we really have this, females in general, sometimes we have, let's just be real. Okay. So this is like authentic place where we have real conversation, point of the podcast. As women, sometimes we have a hard time as you're going through your healing journey, because we all do, right? In truly locking arms with others, we live in a very me society, see me, me shine. But I think locking arms with other incredible people, and instead of seeing that as like a threat or someone you have to compete with, like learning from each other, like we're so much better together. We are so much more powerful, like when we lock arms. So thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, I read off all of your amazing achievements, a little bit about like your career journey, but talk to us a little bit more about your personal career journey in technology, and honestly, what really inspired you to take this path?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked me that, because if you'd asked me that 10, 15 years ago, I would have never guessed I'd be here. Because believe it or not, I'm a physician. So born and raised in India, I grew up there, and like a lot of Indian parents, my parents really focused in and honed in on education. So they put me in school very, very early. I got into med school at 17. You typically get in at 18, right? 18 is the legal age in India where you're legally an adult. And I couldn't drive. And my dad was very strict. He's like, nope, no driving till you're an adult. And because I got into med school at 17, because I got into school a year earlier, every morning he would drive me. He wouldn't trust me to get on the roads. I wasn't old enough for that, but he would then drop me off at med school where I would dissect a human body. I would look at a brain, I would look at a heart. I'd be like, oh, this is how the human body works, right? So that was the beginnings of my career. Really enjoyed my time in med school. And it taught me a lot of life skills, right? Most people, when they think deeply analytical problem solving, they think engineers. But if you think about everything that is packed in our human body, all the bones and the muscles and the tendons, it is a lot. And so much of it can break. So to figure out what is wrong with the patient, you need to be deeply analytical. You need to be able to go through all the possible scenarios and figure out what's wrong. It also teaches you a lot of, how would I put it, softer skills, right? Like people skills, where you figure out how to read a room, how to have a difficult conversations. And I think those are very, very important life skills. Med school was amazing. I learned a lot, moved to the US, got my master's in public health. And while I was there, I had this moment where I did an internship, which was more of a management internship, where it was running a hospital. And it suddenly clicked for me, right? As a physician, I can help a patient every 30 minutes or 45 minutes. But if I was running and on the management side of things, I could take care of all the patients. Like the scale that you can operate when you're managing a system is just tremendous. I knew at that point I wanted to pivot and I wanted to be more on the management side of things. Went to MIT for my MBA and then ended up in New York with a consulting firm called McKinsey. And since then, I've been in retail. So for me, this path wasn't something that I could have predicted in any way, shape, or form. It was following a lot of what felt right, what I was naturally curious about. And along the way, I built and picked up a lot of these skills, which now I apply to my current role as a director of product. So problem solving, being a very strong critical thinker, working cross-functionally with teams, really digging into a problem and trying to find out like what is wrong, how do we fix it? All of that, like I wouldn't have ever assumed that the dots would connect this way, right? The way Steve Jobs says it, like you can only connect the dots when you look backwards. So for me, that's definitely true.
Your journey is so encouraging to me. And even like in the conversations we've had before today, because I think you've modeled the reality for most of us, right? We all start out with this grand plan, right? Like our parents ask us what we want to be when we grow up and we like do well academically or whatever. And we kind of make our path there. But I think the reality for most of us is we aren't where we planned from the beginning, and that's okay, and that there's beauty in that, and that it's okay for you to grow and change and kind of pivot some of what you're doing or what you're after. We also talked in a previous conversation about how data is everything, right? And so while we like attribute that to a certain area in technology and to like really, like really only being in that tech world, the reality is it drives everything in our lives, right? Like we make decisions based off data, we take risks based off data, we pivot in our careers. And a lot of that is just the organic growth for each and every one of us. And it's really important. You said like, I went and guided myself as I felt like I should, right? Which isn't always mapped back to that plan. So I think that's like one of my favorite parts of listening to your journey, because you've had an incredible journey. But what I really want listeners to hone into, especially to our female listeners, is it's okay to pivot. right? And that doesn't, you and I also had the conversation of like, we're not necessarily saying you have to leave your company or go to another career, right? It's about, a pivot could be anything. It could be like a hobby, it could be a direction, it could be a role, it could be a change in company, but it's the pivot and the fear and risk of doing that pivot that holds so many of us back. So you have just lived that out, and it's been beautiful. Okay, so you are in this technology world now, and I actually hate even saying that because while it's true, I think technology is evolving. To this point, it's been like certain roles in a certain segment of a company. And I think the more we see with Gen AI, like technology for the future is anything and everything, right? And it's how it impacts things. And so I do want to talk about the current tech world that you're in. The reality, we know the numbers, 28% nationally of women in tech. So have you, and this doesn't even have to be in the technology space, you've had, a lot of interactions in other spaces. Like, have you had any challenges, or even if it's unconscious gender bias, like, have you encountered that as a woman, and how have you kind of overcome some of that?
I think it's so interesting you say that, because just like literally today morning, I was talking to my mom and we were talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There's this very famous anecdote, right, where someone asks her, like, how many Supreme Court justices should be women? And she says 9. And then the person tells her again, there are only 9 seats. You want all 9 to be women? And she's like, well, the Supreme Court has been around for decades. And for how many of those decades have all 9 judges been men? You never question that. So why are we questioning that, right? So I think there is a nuance there, right? I think for me, when I think about gender equality, it is, if as a woman you want to do something, you should have a path to do it, right? If you're someone who wants to go out and be a colonel or a general, or if you want to be a CEO, or if you want to be a founder and entrepreneur, the ecosystem should support that, right? It shouldn't be dragging you back. It shouldn't be stopping you. It should create an environment which allows you to lift yourself and get to your goals. It should not be dragging you back. But at the same time, if you're someone who values very deeply the ability to do something more creative, whether it's in media, whether you want to be a stay-at-home mom, the ecosystem should also allow you to do that, right? When we think about gender equality, I fundamentally think it should come down to, does the environment support you to achieve your dreams? And it should support you just the way it would support a man. To me, that truly is gender equality. It's not one way or the other. It's the freedom to be whoever you want to be. That's how I think about it. And in terms of sort of facing bias, I've been very lucky. I've had some incredible bosses, both men and women. The women have been sort of the ones who've shown me the way on what is possible. My male bosses have been those who've given me opportunities, who open doors for me. So I've been very, very fortunate. But at times I do feel.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, Women in Technology of Northwest Arkansas and Gumption at my-gumption.com, for their support. Their contributions are critical in bringing these meaningful conversations to you. Stick around for more engaging discussions right after this break.
Sometimes women can be shyer. I used to be someone who's very shy, who did not talk a lot in meetings. I was like, I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to do a good job, and they'll notice me. They'll, give me that promotion. And it was actually interesting. One of my leaders, she's a mentor to me, she came to me and she's like, why are you assuming that everybody knows what you're working on? If you do not talk about what you're working on, if you don't say anything in a meeting, how are people going to know that you have a good idea? Like, it's a 30-minute meeting. Nobody is going to find time and be like, Astha, tell me what you think. How would you solve this? And that was an eye-opener, right? Like, a lot of times as women, we need those mentors who can point out, like, this is what you don't know. Because I would have never looked at it that way. I would have just been like, let my work speak for me. And that for me was a pivotal moment. After that, I was like, no, if I go in a meeting, it is my job to share what I think. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with me, but if I have a strong point of view, if I think it's the correct answer, I gotta share it. I can't just keep quiet. I got to almost market myself, because if I don't, right, someone else who does, and I don't want to say it's men who do it better, but I think men just easier, they have that natural way of like, hey, I'm gonna shoot some ideas. Whereas women, we want it to be perfect. We want it to be right before we share it. And being just more flexible and dynamic was a huge learning for me in this space.
I love that. And kudos to your mentor, because I think the reality is maybe slightly innately as women, we don't really sell ourselves. Like, I will sell you all day long, and I will do that in the most incredible way ever. But when it comes to doing that for ourselves, there's like some type of like reservation of like, I don't want to be bragging, or I don't want to, you know what I mean? And I think that like even subliminally that's been taught to us over time. But the reality is like your presence enough isn't enough, right? You need to be able to speak to, if you want to move forward and if you want the visibility, and it's not about see me, but it's about change and growth for your company, right? Like the more voices we have at the table, the more seats we have at the table, the more diverse our tables are, then companies ultimately get what they want, which is to grow, to make more money. I mean, that's the end result, right? But I think we each have a responsibility. Back to your mentor's comment, we have a responsibility to speak up. We have a responsibility to actually show the next woman or the woman beside us that it's okay to do so, and that it's not also like, I don't know where bragging got this negative connotation, but the reality is like, it's okay. And you should. And, and again, it's not arrogance. There's a difference. And I think a fine line between like being arrogant and cocky and being confident. So the key to growth and success, in my opinion, regardless of what your role is, or if it's outside of work or inside of work, is you walking confidently in whatever you're doing. So I just love to hear that mentors are actually, and other women specifically, are pouring that back in. I will say it is a mindset shift, right? Because again, I don't know that a lot of what we're talking about here happens naturally. So it means we're going to have to open our minds. We're going to have to be intentional about shifting the way that we think about things. And so the one thing also, like, as we've talked about your journey and a lot of like what you're passionate about, you had this concept that we talked about initially about not really like stop playing small. You just talked about it. Like, how do I share? Like, how do I speak up? How do I say what it is I need to say, especially when I know that it will offer value to whatever conversation I'm in? And so did you, like, honestly, like, this is a moment of transparency because this is why we're here. Like, what shift in your mindset did you really have to change and make in order to kind of stop playing small and truly confidently go pursue what your next big move was?
Yeah. That is such a good question. And this is me, but I think it also applies to people as a whole, right? Very few times in life are we black or white. Like suddenly I think one way and the switch flipped and I think a totally different way. There are moments where that happens. And when that happens, that's brilliant because your life can completely change because now you have a different perspective. But for most change, it happens sequentially, right? Because we believe something, and that means we've lived that way for years, right? If we've lived that way for years, I like to think of it as like a 6-lane highway, which gets us from point A to point B. We have like, it's a fully fleshed out highway. There are high-speed cars going that way. And suddenly you have an idea. I want to shift my mindset and I want to think about it differently. Instead of being quiet in a meeting, I'm going to talk. That's going to make you uncomfortable. That's going to feel like it isn't who I am, right? Like I understand why I need to do it, but that is not who I am today. I understand that I need to be confident and present my ideas, but there's a voice in your head that's like, oh, what if it's stupid? What if people think that it's not right, right? And I've found when you're trying to get from point A to point B and you're unsure, start to take small steps, right? The goal is maybe in every meeting, I will make one comment, right? That's it. And when you start to do that, you build that muscle. It's okay. So now instead of that 6-lane highway, you've got like this crumbly pathway that you're building that is new. There are times where you'll just default to that old version of you because that's comfortable. But then the more you practice, the more reps you get under the belt, you start to build a new road. You start to build a new pathway. And over time, that becomes your default, right? So you start by saying one comment in every meeting. Then you find opportunities where you can go and practice that skill. Maybe it's joining Toastmasters. Maybe it's going and giving presentations. Maybe it's doing some sort of stand-up comedy, which really pulls you out of your shell so you can be more confident. But I found fundamentally creating a plan and having baby steps along the way is what helps get you from point A to B. Because if you instantly try to do it, it just feels like you're faking it, right? And then it's exhausting, it's tiring, all of those things. So typically when I think about mindset shifts, I think about it in that way. Think small, come up with a plan, put in the reps, make it my identity, and then it's easy. If you're someone who can just flip the switch, like kudos to you. I have a lot of respect. For me personally, that's never worked.
I agree. I think, okay, it's the old saying, like, you don't build Rome in a day or you don't boil an ocean, right? And the reality of that is it applies to our lives every single day. I mean, for you to think that like it's all going to be perfect and like tomorrow you're going to be like, yes, I listened to this podcast episode and tomorrow I'm going to flip that switch and everything's going to be on, isn't the reality for anyone I know. Again, I don't know the whole world, so kudos to you if you are like that. I also am not. There are baby steps that I also take. And then the thing that we also miss as women is we don't celebrate the small. Like I have this goal and I have to take 10 steps to get there, and then I don't celebrate anything until I'm at that 10th step. Like, what about all the baby milestones? And like, why have we gotten rid of not just celebrating ourselves, but like our others, right? Like, how about, what if I told you, Asta, like, hey, I still have like all of these things to get to my final goal, but I met 3 things. Like, why do we not like celebrate that? Why do we not like avidly, publicly celebrate those types of things? And I really love that you talked about like your identity, right? Because you said like it doesn't happen day one, but over time, as this becomes who you are, it starts being tied into your mindset and how you identify yourself and how you walk. I do want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, because I think men and women alike, and no matter how long you've been in your career and how successful you are, depending on how you define that, imposter syndrome is here for all of us, right? And imposter syndrome really is AKA doubt, right? Like, am I good enough for this? Can I do this? Should I be in this role? I think we all face that. And I bring that up because I think it's really important to our mindset. So as you've like walked through your journey and you just talked about it, you've made small plans and done baby steps. Like, what tools or strategies have really helped you recenter, like when you feel like, okay, because the other reality is every day we don't have it together. Like today, I know my plan and I feel proud of myself, but tomorrow I might wake up and not feel that way. And so how do you intentionally kind of redirect yourself in those moments of like not being sure or it creeping back in? How do you kind of redirect, get back on track, and then continue your plan as you were going?
Yeah, that is a really deep and a good question. I think it's a couple of things. One is the why, right? Like if you're trying to get from point A to B, and it could be like, hey, I want more scope at my work, or I want a promotion, or maybe in your personal life, you're trying to lose weight, right? Whatever it is, clearly articulating, like, do you really want it, right? And if you really want it, why do you want it? And almost writing it down, because there will be moments where it will be exhausting, right? Like you've been in back-to-back meetings and you're exhausted and you're like, do I really want this thing? Do I want more scope? Do I want to expand my role more? But if you clearly lay out like, hey, I want to do this because I want more impact, I want to contribute more, I want to impact millions of customers for my company, then you can ground yourself in that in the moments that you get tired. So having a why is number one. 2 is breaking it down into manageable steps, right? I'm going to go back to how you said it so eloquently. Rome was not built in a day. So having a plan, right? Like in this month, I'm going to accomplish this, because we already have a whole bunch of goals that is just regular life. If you're bringing something new, having a very defined goal, like in this month, I'm going to go and have 4 calls with leaders so that they know that I'm interested in increasing my scope, right? A very defined, contained thing. I know I can do that in a month. The third would be, instead of celebrating your wins, celebrate your reps. So, hey, my goal was to, let's say you want a promotion, right? You don't control that, but you control how many people you reached out and had conversations with. You control how you performed during the quarter. You control whether you spoke to your boss and had the conversation on what would it take to get you promoted. And then did you hit those 5 things that would get you promoted, right? Those are all things under your control. And if you did each of those, even if the promotion didn't happen, I think there's a sense of peace. But we're so focused on the win that we don't focus on the reps. So celebrating the reps more than the wins has become my new motto. And I'm like, I just got to focus on the input, not the output. The output will show up when it has to. And then I think the fourth one is, if I'm really struggling, I ask myself this question, which is, what would it look like if I was having fun doing this? Which is a game changer for me, because even though I might be stressed, I might not feel like, I got it all together. If I can ground myself in like, hey, I'm here to have fun. This life is short. Like, how can I make this more fun? I enjoy the whole process better. So I think those things really help me.
Oh my gosh, so many good nuggets. I'm over here like celebrate the reps. No, this is incredible. We're coming to my least favorite part of every show is towards the end. The last question I always ask anyone because I feel like this is super powerful. That the wisdom that you've given today, the tips, the tricks, there are so many of us that are listening in that will truly walk away from this podcast not saying she has it all together and now I feel like crap. It's like, oh, I can actually take something from that. And like, how do I really apply that back to my life? So thank you for sharing that. But our final question always is, if you had one final piece of advice to give to our listeners, what would it be?
Have fun and be kind. Because if you're having fun and if you're kind, like this is a short trip, we're all sitting on a planet revolving through the galaxy. Like, have fun, be kind. It's going to end very quickly. So
I love it. Kindness costs nothing. Everything else in this life costs something. Like, just be kind. I absolutely love that. I have so enjoyed our time here together today. Again, I know your schedule is incredibly crazy, so thank you for carving time out to be here with all of us. So thank you. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for continuing to follow us. We hope you're getting exactly what you need from all of these incredible women that we continue to share. So thank you again for your support. Continue tuning in, liking, sharing, subscribing, and we'll be back soon with another episode.
Well, that's a wrap. Another episode of Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast. Thanks for tuning in and sharing this time with us. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode with your friends in tech. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us keep bringing in inspiring guests and uncovering topics that matter to you. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and making your mark in the tech world. Goodbye for now.